Welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron, accompanied by Mr. John Harris. As always, we're back reacting to Week 12 of the NFL season, fresh off Thanksgiving. Every team played this week, so we'll literally be going over every team, essentially. Some more than others. But nonetheless, you enjoy your Black Friday / Thanksgiving weekend, John?
Most years I feel like I get involved in Black Friday and my family's big Thanksgiving, but this year everything was pretty low key, didn't buy anything, nothing along those lines. So pretty low key holiday.
Yeah, pretty much same for me. A little bit lower key than usual in regards to that vibe. I accidentally bought something. I don't know if you ever had this. Like my parents, I bought something like off a site on Black Friday. I used their login, but I did a mistake where like they already had their card on it, so I charged their card. It was only like $12. So I was like, that was unfortunate. Just unfortunate. I felt really bad, and they haven't texted me back. So I'm like, hey, like I can afford to pay to get the $13. Just tell me, and I haven't heard from them. So maybe free Christmas gift for me. I don't know.
Early Christmas present.
I know. So anyways, and yeah, it's that time too where I gotta start thinking of stuff. But like, I'm not the type of person that I don't really want a lot of stuff. So that's a tough thing to think about. First world problems. Nonetheless, speaking of first world problems, we're gonna dive into obviously our picks and the results of Week 12. We're gonna start with the Thanksgiving games, of course. Gonna start with one that was oddly close. And that was the Buffalo Bills. They managed to escape the Detroit Lions 28-25. They played once again at Ford Field for the second straight week, although this time they were not the home team. But once again, they were victorious, though took some late magic. John, any thoughts in regards to what went down here?
Like you said, surprisingly competitive game. The Lions, it sort of felt like were in control for most of it. And I say that because if the Bills are in control, you'd expect them to blow them out, right? And so the Lions even maintaining it a close game and honestly holding the lead for quite a bit of it, you kind of think that the Lions are doing pretty good here. Like they might come out with a win. But unfortunately, the greatness of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs struck again at the very end of the game. Stephon Diggs, kind of a slow start to this one, which seems like it's sort of happening the last couple of weeks. Like, I don't know, maybe defenses are really starting to adjust to what they're doing offensively and taking Diggs away late. And then, the Bills are adjusting well. I'm not sure exactly why Stephon Diggs had some slow starts, but he's finishing strong, and that's kind of what matters. So Bills came out with a W. It wasn't a clean one. It wasn't an impressive one. It's not going to instill confidence in anybody, but they got the win. Like I said, Diggs and Allen, they showed up late. That was one of those crazy plays that it's like, yeah, like there's like 3 or 4 quarterbacks that can make a play like that. 3 or 4 quarterbacks that can make a throw, and then like 1 or 2 duos that can make that kind of a play in the league these days. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is for the Lions. Tough way to lose, but you gotta be happy that at least you were close. But at the end of the day, I've started to see a lot of people questioning Dan Campbell's job security. I thought he coached a really great game. I thought, he managed the clock well at the end there. Like I said, it's just you were going against Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. And if you were going against, pretty much 30 other teams, you probably win. And so it's just a tough situation. I don't think Dan Campbell should necessarily be fired off of this game, but definitely a conversation piece that people are having.
Well, no, we won't probably have because we're a little, I don't know, unless you feel that way. But yeah, you kind of hit it around the head. I mean, Lions, I'll say ran out of gas, but if maybe a year or two from now, a more developed Lions team would have pulled this one out. But you're at least seeing the pieces fall in place. Good offensive line. Jared Goff was kept clean for the most part. They got the run game going with Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams, he's been very solid for them. And, once they get Jameson Williams back in the fold and maybe DJ Chark, we saw him catch a touchdown. If he can just stay healthy, they got a pretty formidable offense. And even with Jared Goff, and and they could easily upgrade in quarterback this offseason too. So, yeah, I'm not of the camp of let's get rid of Dan Campbell. I mean, the fact that you were even tied with Buffalo, with however many seconds were left, and like you already mentioned, John. I mean, not many teams or even duos. There's only a handful of guys that can make the play that Josh Allen and Diggs made, especially in that moment, in that situation. But it was needed because, like you already mentioned too, Bills offense, teams have kind of started to figure out how to slow them down. Like you mentioned, let's double Diggs, take him away. Okay, what are you going to do? Isaiah McKenzie had a really good start to the game, but second half wasn't really there. And, everyone wants to say Gabe Davis is a great number 2, but once again, he's not really having the effect. And a guy you've called out a little bit previously, Dawson Knox, didn't really do much either. And he's getting paid like a top 10 tight end, and he really hasn't come along that way. So, and also too, a guy that I thought would have a little more contribution would be Nyheim Hines, because, they are around the trade deadline. They're already sifting out running backs. So I was like, okay, like, they're going to get someone they're going to incorporate in the offense. Even James Cook, James Cook was coming off a really good game last week. Didn't get much work this week as well. So I'm not sure, if he was in the doghouse or something of the sort. So, some potential concern for Buffalo in the long term. Obviously, they got the win here. They're going to make the playoffs unless, the sky falls down for them. But, it is concerning that a lot of it is on Josh Allen. Not that he can't handle it, but, it just, like we've seen against the Chiefs last year, the championship game, they really only had like one good half that Josh Allen got going. And this defense too is kind of faltering for the Bills. And once again, 25 points to the Lions, a little concerning there. So some concerns for Buffalo going forward that we've already kind of prefaced going into this week, and not really feeling much better about afterwards. But hey, all you can do is play the person in front of you. That's what they did. They won. And maybe they can make these adjustments and improvements going forward. And then they also, if I remember correctly, they unfortunately did lose Von Miller this game too. So more concerns for Buffalo as the season starts getting into the final stretch here. So I believe they said like week to week, right? He's out for at least a couple of weeks. Could be the rest of the season. They're really keeping it broad there, Buffalo. So hopefully for their sake, he can get back healthy, because Von Miller will be key for them in the playoffs, obviously. It's no brainer there. So, but Bills get the must-needed win against the Lions. Lions win streak kind of snapped there, but hopefully won't be the last for Dan Campbell and the gang there. But now we go to your game, John. The second Thanksgiving game wasn't as competitive, although the score may have indicated that, if you just look at 28-20, which is Cowboys beating the Giants 28-20, but especially in second half, seemed like Dallas really kind of found their stride and just shut the door on the Giants. Giants got literally what was like almost last second touchdown, basically, which, hey, helped us. It helped us in regards to covering. Now, other people, though, that actually put money on it, they probably wouldn't be too happy. But nonetheless, though, John, I'm sure you're happy. Your Cowboys got to win. So what were your thoughts in regards to this victory against the Giants, which is a key one, because now y'all are, I think, a game and a half at least ahead. You won both matchups, so.
Right. Yeah. This is big for tiebreakers. Cowboys now 8-3, Giants 7-4. And so in the eventuality that they potentially have the same record at the end of the season, Cowboys won both games, so they would have the higher seed. And it could, you never know what happens with the Eagles. Like if all of a sudden there's an action with a 3-way tie, this is just big for the Cowboys to have in case, anything was to go crazy with the division title or just the wild card seedings. Regardless, great win for the Cowboys. I hope anybody who's a Zeke hater, especially within the Cowboys fan base, because there's a lot of them, saw the value of Zeke. He had a great game, averaged almost 6 yards a carry, while Tony Pollard, who actually got more carries, averaged only about 3. Sometimes the speed guy is not always the best option. Like I think Tony Pollard is a really great running back, but I still think that Zeke, in terms of just the fundamentals of how to play the position, is really good. He doesn't have the same speed that he used to, and that's why I think Tony Pollard at this point is probably the superior runner, because he can just make a lot more happen with less. But in terms of hitting the right holes, finding those lanes, getting, 2 extra yards every time, That's what Zeke's going to do. He's not going to bust off a 60-yard run for a touchdown like Tony Pollard can. But on those plays where he's supposed to get 5, he'll get 7. And yeah, in this game, he had a really good performance. So shout out to Zeke, because I think that he's a running back that has, or just even a player that has not really gotten a lot of credit over the last couple of years. And I think that he was a really key part for why they won this one. Dak didn't have the greatest of games. He did throw 2 interceptions. But they weren't all entirely his fault. But at the same time, he got to be better in that regard, because it did put him behind the 8 ball early in this one, and it allowed the Giants to stay kicking. They went into halftime with a lead. But the third quarter, this is what I wanted to see out of the Cowboys for like the last decade. Was okay. Like I talked about last week, when they lose to the Packers, they come out and they beat the Vikings in that manner. That's how you respond. This was another game where it's like, this is how you respond. You came out in the first half. You didn't look that great. Dak had a couple interceptions, and you're down 13-7. You come out in the fourth quarter, you get the ball, you score, you get a stop, you score again. Like that. That's just how I wanted them to respond. You come out and you win that quarter 14-0. You take the lead 21-13. I loved what I saw out of them. And so I applaud the coaching staff, Mike McCarthy, Kellen Moore. I've been very critical of them, but they came out and they responded well. I liked the amount of players that got involved in this one. Michael Gallup had sort of a resurgence game here, 5 catches, 63 yards, nothing crazy, but considering what he had been doing over the last month, this was a really good sighting to see. He was getting open. He was getting separation. CeeDee Lamb, I don't think people have really been talking about CeeDee Lamb the way that they should be, but the guy has climbed up to 2nd in the entire NFC in receiving yards. People were, being very critical of him to start the year, saying, oh, he can't be a true number 1. He's starting to play like one. So shout out to CeeDee Lamb. And the defense, they did their thing. Micah Parsons. I know a lot of Giants fans are giving the excuse that Andrew Thomas had the flu. Something that you always say is, if you play, there's no excuses. Like, you chose to play, you chose to strap up, you chose to go out there and put the helmet on, put the pads on, and go to war. And he had the flu, but Micah Parsons dealing with injuries. There was sickness in the Cowboys, and Micah Parsons, I think he won the day. He didn't win the first matchup, but he did win this one, getting 2 sacks, I believe, or maybe just 1 sack. I can't find him on the stats. Yeah, he had 2. He had 2.
It was 2.
Yeah, and they were both
on ESPN at least.
And they were both on Andrew Thomas. In fact, Micah Parsons tweeted after the game and said, "Heard he was the best, so I stayed on his side the entire night," which is true. So anyway, good win for the Cowboys. Like you said, the score wasn't as close as the final score was because the Giants scored in garbage time. Offensively, they really just couldn't get much going until the very end. Saquon, they knew that he was going to be the guy, and so they shut down the run, and then they had to start throwing the ball a lot more. And Daniel Jones throwing the ball 35 times is just not really a recipe for success. So yeah, I don't know. Daniel Jones, even his stat line, the 228 passing yards and a touchdown. If you remove that last drive, he was hovering about 170, 0 touchdowns. I don't know. If Giants fans are still on the Daniel Jones train, maybe this will open your eyes that okay, Daniel Jones is he's good enough to perform when you only need to put up, 17, 20 points to win. But if you really want to get over the hump, I think they got to look for a different quarterback long term because Daniel Jones is just kind of below average. So yeah, long-winded answer, but good win for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I just want to really head off Giants, especially at this point, due to injuries and how they built their team. It's lack of explosiveness outside of Saquon Barkley, but like you mentioned, Cowboys made a concerted effort. Don't let Saquon get going, and Giants had really a lot of struggles on offense, like you already mentioned. I don't have much else to add. You mentioned Dak too, giving him a little bit of a break. I mean, those 2 picks in the first half. It's nice to see him bounce back in the second half, and he made some explosive plays. And also too, like you already mentioned, Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore stayed patient with the run, even when they were behind, especially that opening drive out of halftime. A lot of running on. They stayed committed. Every first down, at least from when I double checked the play-by-play, started with the run. And I know it's a little bit old school and a little bit predictable, but most of the time y'all were getting 3, 7, even one time he got 13. Had a few penalties that drive too, but hey, just having the run helped your offensive line and opens up the playbook, and obviously scored a touchdown there. And yeah, respect to CeeDee. And it's only his, I think, 3rd year too.
Yeah,
give the guy a little,
first year without Amari Cooper as well.
Yeah, you got a little bit of a break. I mean, Justin Jefferson, same draft class, if I remember correctly too. He's obviously balling out, but he's kind of coming his own this year, and he got, granted, he had a little bit different of a circumstance. So, yeah, it's going to take time. And where Dak's been in and out, especially last, basically year and a half. So that kind of hurts the development of a number one type guy anyway. But yeah, you mentioned Michael Gallup had a nice little spurt there. Was it like in the second or third quarter? He had a nice little, like, there's like I forget if there was one drive. I went to him like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, the very beginning of the game, I think it was the first 2 drives, he was doing the damage.
Yeah, so nice to see him, producing and being a viable number 2 for Dallas. But yeah, I mean, Giants, I'm not the one to say people frauds, but they definitely are starting to come back a little bit to earth. Injuries have obviously played a factor, but like you mentioned with Andrew Thomas, like I say, like, once again, not dogging him, but part of your responsibility of saying you're healthy is that, okay, I'm healthy enough to play and not, at least up to my standards. And, obviously he felt that way, at least pregame, who knows after the game. But yeah, and that him and the coaching staff agreed to that. So that's on the Giants. You can't make excuses for that. But yeah, big win for the Cowboys. Like we mentioned, crucial for their division and, or at least in the NFC race too, because they may not win their division, but at least for wild card, hey, maybe you don't have to play as good. You obviously can play a lower ranked team as opposed to a higher one for wild card weekend. So that may help. So good win for the Cowboys. And now we go to another NFC team. That is the Vikings. Primetime Kirk finally had a good showing per se. He and the Vikings beat the Patriots 33-26. Patriots had some chances at the end there. Fortunately, the Aguilar memes came out in full force, especially after that last stop. I think it was the last. I think it was like second last pass, but that pass towards the end of the game didn't kind of let up on it. Nonetheless, though, John, what are your thoughts on the Vikings getting a big win over the Patriots?
Big game, obviously, from Justin Jefferson. He's making this a pretty regular thing. Kevin O'Connell, I think, is starting to live up to all the hype that was there, that he's going to utilize Justin Jefferson in that Cooper Kupp type of role. It's where he's just really going to dominate in a lot of games. And shout out to Kirk Cousins. I mean, listen, the primetime thing, like, it was real. Like, he was so marginally different in primetime games throughout his career. And in this game, 30 for 37, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have an interception, but still 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. And he did that despite the fact that Dalvin Cook had 22 carries for only 42 yards. That's 1.9 yards per carry. So they had almost no run game. Like, they literally total, I think they had about 60 rushing yards. And despite that, Kirk Cousins came out. He balled out. And I think that's impressive. I think Kirk's got to get some credit for that, especially against a Patriots team that has been giving some other teams a lot of trouble, and is, a winning team right now, is looking like they would be fighting for a playoff spot. So good one for the Vikings. There was that controversial call on the Hunter Henry touchdown that they said he didn't maintain possession on the ground. I don't know exactly what they said or what the ruling was, but basically to me, it looked like he caught it, crossed the goal line. His hand looked like it was underneath the ball the entire time. It did move, but it didn't look like his hand, like he wasn't holding the ball. He didn't maintain possession. To me, I don't know. But definitely a controversial call. And for Patriots fans, I feel your pain. I've been there. It sucks when you feel like there was a call that kind of changed the course of the game. But I think for the Patriots, offensively, at least, they still had a really solid performance. I would have liked that they continued to run the ball more because Ramondre Stevenson, although he still had a major impact in the receiving game, he was doing well in terms of rushing, but they just kind of strayed away from the run. And it seems like maybe they could have controlled the clock a little bit, especially since I believe at a halftime it was tied. It was tied at a halftime, and then at a third quarter they had the lead, and then going to the fourth quarter the Vikings outscored them 10-0 to get the win. So I don't know, it seems like there was opportunities there for them to maintain the clock a little bit more, but otherwise the Vikings, they were the better team.
Yeah, I think we're seeing, I mentioned it before, Kevin O'Connell's impact, seeing, hey, in previous years, like in primetime, when the Vikings played, usually in primetime, you're going to play the better teams. Teams take away the run, slow down Dalvin Cook. Kirk Cousins in the past game didn't really have answers. But like you mentioned, almost similar script, except this time, Kirk Cousins in the past game had answers, even had a little bit of trickery, through pulled in New England on New England, because New England's always famous for pulling a trick play here and there. Had Justin Jefferson, throw a ball too. It wasn't a touchdown or anything, but just something to make the defense think. I think especially good to see too, like for their offense, especially their passing offense, You see, Hawkinson have good contribution. He got a touchdown. Adam Thielen had, contributions, and obviously Justin Jefferson did Justin Jefferson things. So that was key for them. But yeah, I am with you. I'm a little bit shocked New England wasn't as patient with the run game as, because they weren't doing terrible. I mean, you mentioned Stevenson, 7 for 36, wasn't doing bad. And usually that's been their identity all year is, hey, we're going to run the ball predominantly, and then, we'll take some shots with Mac Jones or, do enough in the passing game and lean our defense. But yeah, I'm not sure if that was just, pace of the game got to them. And remember too, Matt Patricia calling plays, so he's not fully maybe he's not fully experienced, and he this was a game where he just accidentally strayed from the right way. I don't know, but yeah, a little bit disappointing. Not say disappointing, but lackluster performance from their offense, especially towards the end of the game. Kind of saw a little bit of frustration out of Mac Jones, especially at the end there, and tough year for him, obviously, because coming off that really good rookie year, I think we all expect him to take the next step. But to be fair to him, offensive coaching changes. It's always going to be a step down. You're going from Josh McDaniels to Matt Patricia, who, Matt Patricia's been solid, but still a big step down. And, still lacking a true number one. And you mentioned the Hunter Henry touchdown got called back. While it does suck for New England, I saw a lot of Pittsburgh fans rise up and call karma for the Jesse James. I guess it was a similar overturned call a couple of years ago. So, hey, maybe Patriots fans, maybe a little bit of karma's coming back. Just took a couple of years. Nonetheless, though, I mean, still Patriots still in the AFC mix. Granted, maybe kind of out of the division race and to win the division with the Bills and I think they're technically on the bottom too. I think, but nonetheless, I still think there'll be a force, but. Good win for the Vikings. I wouldn't say it's a validating win, but another one they can put and say, hey, like we're kind of for real. We beat the Patriots, very good defense that shut down the Jets previously and other teams, and Kirk Cousins answered in prime time. So maybe we'll get a good primetime Kirk. Surprised we didn't get chain Kirk, but maybe they did. Maybe it wasn't as publicized, but who knows? But nonetheless, great win for the Vikings on Thanksgiving. So those are Thanksgiving games. Now let's move on to the Sunday games. Going to start off with the kind of one that went as expected. Miami Dolphins, they beat the Houston Texans 30-15, although it was 30-0 at half. And heck, I think if I remember correctly, they pulled their starters in the third quarter too. So especially in Miami's eyes, this game was over and done with pretty quickly. Kyle Allen was starting John. Kind of his start went as expected, as the scoreline kind of said. So any thoughts, things you want to add on in regards to the Dolphins win over the Texans?
Not really. It was the Texans. They're playing Kyle Allen, who's backup quarterback. The game kind of went as expected. The only thing I didn't expect was Jeff Wilson, and the run game actually wasn't that efficient. The Texans' run defense has been the worst in the league all year, and I thought that this would be a pretty big Jeff Wilson game. It wasn't. He still got a touchdown, and he was still involved in the receiving game a little bit with 13-yard catch, but for the most part, it was just the air attack. And for the Dolphins, that's always going to be all right because you got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who both had 85 yards. So, I don't know. Good win for the Dolphins, as expected, the way that it ended up going. They didn't win the way that most people thought they would, but they won nonetheless. So, nothing crazy to really add.
Yeah, just overall, dominant team win. I saw people, we had one, another, I won't say, but another addition to Tua's MVP resume, which he didn't do anything to hurt the resume, but I think this is just more of an overall team win. Saw the defense get a score, right? And defense did a lot, offense did enough. You only play for a half. It's the Texans, like we've mentioned before. They worst team in the league, probably, definitely. So I mean, congratulations, you did your job, but it's not like an impressive win. So. But hey, you did your job. I got to give you a thumbs up. Kudos there. So Miami takes care of business against the Texans. Not much else to add. However, though, a game that was relatively exciting was the Baltimore Ravens and the Jacksonville Jaguars. This one went down to the wire, but fortunately Justin Tucker could not come through on a 67-yard field goal, and the Jaguars win this one 28-27. Jackson was definitely upset because he was chirping after the game, retweeted. I don't know if you saw that video, that fan freaking out, or their reaction after the game, which I imagine it was every Ravens fan after this year, because it's been tough. We've lost a lot of close games, especially at the end. So, John, what are your thoughts in regards to the Jaguars battling back here and getting a huge win over the Ravens?
It's a good win. I think a lot more people are surprised than I am, because just once again, if you sort of look at like the EPA statistics, the Jaguars are top 10 in both throughout most of the year. And so when you see stuff like that based on the expectations of every single play, you would think that they would be a really good team. And you see their record, they're 4-7, and you kind of just chalk that up to, all right, they've kind of been unlucky, or they're playing really well, and then they have like the one play that shoots them in the foot and kind of kills all momentum they have at the end of these drives. So yeah, I mean, good win for the Jaguars. For the Ravens, there's sort of been some controversy around Lamar Jackson clapping back at a fan online. That's a whole thing, but not really going to get into it. I think that Lamar has proven his value and his worth, despite what some of the people online want to say. But other than that, I mean, like, I felt like this was kind of a statement game for Trevor Lawrence, someone who didn't have the greatest rookie year. He's had ups and downs throughout this season. You're playing against a very good 7-3 Baltimore Ravens team. And at the end, when you needed to, in the fourth quarter, you needed to show up. Your offense put up 18 points. You had a game-winning drive. And you did this without Travis Etienne in a run game. Literally, the rushing attack, I think, had like 40 total yards. Travis Etienne gets hurt early in the game. Apparently, he got cleared at some point, but they didn't bring him back because they didn't want to risk re-injury. So he should be good to go next week. But he only had 2 carries for 3 yards when he got hurt. Michael Hasty, the backup, comes in. He only gets 28 yards. Snoop Conner came in. He only got 11 yards. So like they didn't really have any run game, but Trevor Lawrence still had 321 yards and 3 touchdowns. So like I said, statement game for him. And I think there's a big confidence booster for not only the Jaguars, but for Lawrence himself.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that point because we've seen, Eagles game, a couple games and moments this year where like Trevor Lawrence doesn't really deliver, kind of came up short. Didn't do that this week. And especially you mentioned no run game. So, it was a very encouraging performance to see out of your potential franchise quarterback, number 1 overall pick. This is what you kind of want to see, a game where, okay, run game's not really going. You're playing a tough, Baltimore team, and he played spectacularly, and Zay Jones was leading receiver. So not that Zay Jones is bad, he's obviously proven, he's a solid NFL wide receiver, but just imagine when they get Calvin Ridley and, this offense gets, more mature, this team generally, because it's still a very young team, especially on offense. But yeah, major props to Trevor Lawrence. Probably should have been a baller of the week, but I didn't make him one. Neither did John. But in regards to Baltimore, I mean, once again, you already hit it. I'm not faulting really Lamar Jackson. Like we mentioned before, it seems like teams like it seems like it has like it's happened pretty much every year Lamar's been in, especially the past couple of years, where the Ravens offense starts off really good, has some new pass concepts and new ways to move the ball passing wise, but then whether it be injuries or teams adjusting to that and figuring that out, and then Baltimore not really adjusting off of that, the pass offense starts struggling, and Lamar can't throw the ball. But just watching this game too, not many people were open, and when there were throws being made, he delivered, like the Deshaun Jackson throw, which I think set up a late score too. That was a big one. And once again, like almost barely had any time, almost pulled off what like Josh Allen, Mahomes have done. And like you mentioned last podcast or last week, like we get kind of spoiled by those guys because we kind of see them do it, not on a consistent basis, but definitely more often than we've seen it in recent years. And they almost did it here too. I mean, like 10 seconds-ish left. I argue that the tight end, Oliver, took too long to decide if he wanted to, go out of bounds. They had 2 timeouts, just get down or go. Took a little bit too much time. They only had time to kick the field goal, and it was only like a yard short. So they had probably time for one more play to get a little more yardage. Justin Tucker probably nails that too. There has been criticism. I'm not sure how you feel. Maybe John Harbaugh should have taken a timeout to give so that Tucker and them didn't have to run out and kick the field goal. I don't know, though, because once again, if he misses still, it's like, oh, you iced your own kicker. So I don't know. I think that's a little bit. But, yeah, just ease off on Lamar, people, because he did what he was supposed to do. They ran out of time. That's basically what happened. Like, and he set them up to score, set them up ahead originally, and credit Jacksonville too for going for two and executing that. I love that. So huge win for Jacksonville at home. Like, we both picked Jacksonville against the spread. We both had that weird feeling that they would keep it close. And hey, I mean, Jacksonville, Florida is an odd place to play for some people. So obviously hit the Ravens this week as they fell short against the Jags. So big win for them, like we mentioned. Now we go to a win that was definitely rocking the Big Apple as the New York Jets, led by Mike White, get the win over the Chicago Bears, 31-10. John, what were your thoughts in regards to the hero of New York, their franchise quarterback, as some New Yorkians or New York people fans are already proclaiming him? He's their hero, John. What were your thoughts in regards to this?
Good performance from the Jets. Honestly, Mike White kind of surprised me. He had a really good game. And just to be candid, I think he's at least earned the job for another couple weeks because of a performance like this. Just to quote Robert Saleh after the game, he made the easy look easy. And that was something that, unfortunately, with Zach Wilson, he has a fantastic arm, but it seems like sometimes the easy wasn't super easy. And for this Jets team that's trying to make the playoffs, Mike White was able to do that. And that's all they're really asking. That being said, the people talking about he's a savior, and I've already seen some people in the media start declaring that he's the franchise quarterback and blah, blah, blah. It's one game. Like, yes, this one game is better than any of the games Zach Wilson has had all year. So, it's something to be noted. But it is one game. Like I mentioned in the episode before the benching happened, let's all calm down because Mike White did this last year. Zach Wilson got hurt. Mike White comes in and plays against the Bengals. He throws 4 touchdowns. Everybody starts freaking out. And then 2 weeks later, he threw 4 interceptions in a game. All right, Mike White is still a backup for a reason. I don't think that he's going to be the franchise quarterback by any means. But like I said, this was a good enough performance against a bad defense. Let's not act like this was the greatest defense ever. Also, Eddie Jackson, unfortunately, on the second Garrett Wilson touchdown, he got hurt. I can't remember what the injury was, but he's been placed on IR. He's done for the season. So, basically their best defensive player is now out, which didn't help matters, for the rest of the day. But Mike White had a good game against a bad defense. And like I said, I think that earns him at least the starting job for the next 2 weeks. And then you reevaluate after that, because I still think that Joe Flacco's on the roster and he's someone that should be considered. And I don't think that they should completely, destroy the idea of potentially still having Zach Wilson go back out there. That being said, just the way that, everything has sort of transpired over the last couple weeks, I'm kind of under the belief that I think a split between the Jets and Zach Wilson is the best course of action. I don't know how you feel, but I think that the media has turned on Zach Wilson. The New York Jets fans are a very quick moving fan base, if you will. And so they have very quickly turned on Zach Wilson. And I'm not sure that relationship can be repaired. So I don't know. Because I don't really expect them to go back to Zach Wilson for the rest of the season. And so I don't know. And I just think that it's most likely that a split should happen, because I think for Zach Wilson, he still has plenty of potential. He still has a lot of arm talent. And I think that maybe elsewhere would be a best spot for him to develop. And then as we were talking with our friend Matt, the Jets are not in a situation where a developing quarterback is kind of what they need right now. They're 7-4. They're trying to go after the playoffs. And if that's your goal, taking your time and developing a QB is not really a thing that you need. You need someone who can just come in and execute right away. So, like I said, I think a split for both sides might be the right move. What do you think?
I'm along the same belief. I want to start with this, and calm down, Jets fans. All right, calm down, general New York. I feel like. And I only have a couple friends that are, Jets fans. But ironically enough, they're Knicks fans too. And I just feel like there's some sort of similarity there. Like, y'all want change to happen. Y'all want to be in control so much. And I just think, in regards to the benching, we'll see how it goes long term, especially short, but at least for the rest of the season, because it will be interesting. Because like you mentioned, Mike White, he played great. And I'm not going to take that away from Mike. He played amazing. He played great. Do want to add, had a third lowest average depth of target. So kind of similar to his performance against Cincinnati, where he went off. A lot of short. They made life easy for him, the offense. While remember I mentioned in the Patriots game, a game where it was windy. Also, granted, it was raining in this game. I think Zach Wilson was second or third in the league in average depth of target. So Zach was definitely throwing it down the field more. They're asking him to throw it down the field more. But that game was 2 weeks ago. But yeah, I think a split is probably inevitable because, I mean, if Zach ever struggles again, God forbid he throws a pick, as we've already mentioned, everyone's be calling for his head, especially with Mike White or Joe Flacco. Once again, Joe Flacco, I know he had a good performance against the Browns as a big win, but remember the Browns blew that game. Okay, completely blew that game. That they just shouldn't even have an opportunity. I don't think Zach Wilson's like a developmental project. We have to remember too, he missed most of training camp this year. He missed most of a good portion of last year. It wasn't until the end of the year where he really got going. Just to also add on, Tua, we were Tua criticizers, but it's not until the third year that it all started clicking for him. And this is only year 2 for Zach Wilson. Heck, you mentioned it last podcast. Really, this is technically he just finished his rookie year in terms of amount of games. So, but nonetheless, the Jets, they made this decision, and it's an interesting bed that they put themselves in because, yeah, if they have a good enough team, definitely to be a contender, and heck, if all goes well the next few years, they should have a contender here. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing, I'm not sure where the cap space is, but obviously you have to find a buyer for Zach Wilson because you can't just have him be your backup. Now you can't have the number 2 overall pick sit there and that whole thing fester. So it'll be interesting to see if they find a buyer, which I think they will. But yeah, who will they fill in too? Well, that would be a question. Now maybe Lamar Jackson. Once again, I'm not sure the cap space, but I'm not sure how it will fit in that offense. But it's an interesting bet. I think unless they get a guy in free agency, a franchise quarterback in free agency somehow, some way, maybe via trade too. I just think this may be a franchise altering move that could cost them and instead of being a little bit more patient with Zach Wilson. You mentioned this is not a great Bears defense. Their best player was Eddie Jackson to start the game, and he got hurt very quickly. And no offense to Eddie, I would say he's above average safety, but if this was a week to get your struggling quarterback right, this would have been the week to put in Zach Wilson. And I think they also play some pretty lesser defenses, especially pass defenses going forward. So, yeah, I just think that I feel like Saleh kind of succumbed to the outside pressure. It's funny, these coaches always talk about, we don't let the outside pressure affect us. But maybe because New York, he did. Granted, it was the right move short term. They won this game. But I think they would have won this game with Zach Wilson anyway. So they put themselves in this quandary. And, yeah, I'm with you. I think, obviously, Mike White deserves at least another start, to keep going. You can't bench Mike White after y'all just won. He had a really good game where he literally didn't really have a mistake. So, but for Zach Wilson's sake, and I imagine, he's probably, obviously he hates some humble pie, but a little bit upset about how it's all been handled. I think both sides, like you said, just need to move on. I've thought of a few destinations, but I mean, really until March, where I'm not going to sit here and list them all because, it'd be a better idea whenever this season comes to a turn. But, it'll be interesting to see how Zach reacts to this and how they manage it. Because I just don't foresee, like you've already alluded to, I don't foresee this ending with Zach Wilson being, their starting quarterback in 2023.
I do want to push back just a little bit on, I don't think Robert Saleh, personally, I don't think Robert Saleh succumbed to the pressure. I think that it was more Zach Wilson's comments on not letting the defense down. You got to think, if you're a defensive player on that team, I'd be pretty pissed. I'd be like, screw you, man. You're supposed to be the leader of our team, and you put up 3 points. You absolutely let us down. And I think that Robert Saleh, the benching, and also not just benching, Zach Wilson wasn't even active for the game. I think he was trying to send a message. And I think, because then he also said, Zach's career's not done in New York. And so maybe this is hey, we're going to sit you down for a while, and you're going to have to, accept that and then bring you back at some point. But the issue is that then when Mike White balls out, you're kind of stuck in this quandary of now how do you bring that back? I don't know if he expected this to happen. Like I said, I don't think this was necessarily personally, I don't think this was Robert Saleh actually making a move that he thought made them a better team right now. I think this was him attempting to send a message. I could be wrong on that. I'm not a Jets fan. I don't know Robert Saleh whatsoever. That's just my read on the situation. So don't take this as fact. This is just purely opinion.
I mean,
that's kind of how I read it.
Well, because also too, I think like a couple weeks ago he had already said like, Zach's our guy. They've been backing him up, and granted, it's like kind of, it just seems a little wishy washy, flip floppy to me. Like all of a sudden, yes, he had a terrible loss to the Patriots, and once again, it's like, oh, we hear all this coach talk. Oh, we're moving on to next week. Last week happened. Bill Belichick was on all the time, but some reason, and granted, you need to evaluate what happened previously. I understand that, but like.
I'm saying, like, I think you gotta cater to the locker room, right? Like, if 80% of your player base is really pissed at a guy and like they aren't backing him anymore, that could really derail your season. And so I think that maybe this was like, hey, like sending a message to the locker room that like I have your guys back, and like this kind of behavior, like we're a team, we're not going to allow this kind of a thing, even though it's just one comment. Like I said, I think he was trying to send a message, not even to the public, but to the team. And now we're just kind of in this awkward situation of like, okay, you sent the message, but can the team ever allow Zach back in? I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm just saying that's you've crossed a line that you probably will not be able to step back from. And I'm not sure if, like you mentioned, Mike White didn't expect him to ball out, but he did. And granted, once again, that's a very bad Bears defense, especially without missing their best player, which wasn't, no offense, once again, not really a marquee guy that you have to worry about. And once he was gone, I mean, name me another Bears defender. I mean, not you. I know you can, but I mean, even then, that's a tough. Like, I only know like Jalen Johnson, which is like their corner from a couple of years ago. After that, like I don't watch much Bears football outside of just for the podcast. I'm not so like, especially now they're missing Eddie Jackson. I'm like, they have I think they're the rookie too. Brisker is the only one I know, and he didn't even play this game. Right? They have Jaquan Brisker? Yeah. So
they drafted Jaquan Brisker second round.
Yeah, I'm looking at the box score. He at least didn't contribute in the box score, so I'm assuming he didn't play. So, but yeah, and then also no Justin Fields added on top of that. Granted, that's not what the Jets were expecting, but like it was just a perfect storm to get your young quarterback confidence, and they missed out on it, I think. And yeah, we'll see what happens going forward for Zach Wilson and the Jets. And heck, who even know? I don't know if they even named a starter this week, but I expect it to be Mike White. Like we've mentioned, is just how do you bench the guy after he really did no wrong? So big win for the Jets though, and obviously for Mike White. And good luck to that rabid fan base. You were very nice about how you put it. I would have, for better or for worse, Jet fan base / New York Knicks, because I feel like they're oddly connected. You got some rabid fans, Anyways, but hey, I mean, there are some other rabid fan bases anyways. But now we go to a rather uneventful game, another one. And in typical Broncos fashion, kind of a boring game. And unfortunately, though, they couldn't pull out the win here, as Sam Darnold, if you want to give quarterback wins, even though him and the Panthers, they win 23-10 here. Not another good performance from the Broncos offense. Russell Wilson got yelled at by one of the defensive linemen. Caught that on video, though some believe, maybe the lineman was just upset in general. Maybe he's trying to hype up Russell in the offense. Maybe not take out of context, but nonetheless, Panthers take care of business here, John. What were your thoughts in regards to their win over the Broncos?
Broncos suck, man. Like their offense is so bad. Like it's so crazy, and like I've been someone who's kind of just like my natural approach is normally I'm a slow mover. It's hard for me to really get on the stuff, but like Russell Wilson's just playing bad. Like every single week I'm seeing plays where like there's people open downfield and he's not hitting them. But once again, I still maintain he's not entirely to blame. Like there's just a lot going on there. And the unfortunate part is like there's no out in that contract. Like it's impossible. So you got to try and make it work. And I know I have a buddy who's a diehard Broncos fan, and he is kind of over Nathaniel Hackett at this point. He wants him to be gone because this team, if you keep Nathaniel Hackett and it continues to not work, like you have no future really. And so he thinks that they got to make a move. Like they're like how especially with the new ownership group, like this was supposed to be a win now moment. And so the only way to try and salvage this is to probably fire Nathaniel Hackett, because you can't get rid of Russell Wilson. Like that's a non-starter. Like anyone who's saying they got to get rid of him, the amount of dead cap that they would eat over the next 5 years would set the franchise back so far that like you cannot rebuild during that time. There's no shot. Like they couldn't afford to keep anybody. Like it would be disastrous, and they don't have their own picks. Like there's just that's not a possibility. And so it seems like really the only way forward at this point is to probably fire Nathaniel Hackett, and you got to work with Russell Wilson and say who's the coach that can make this work, because we have to make it work. So I don't know. The Broncos are just not a very good football team. That really sucks. Like I'll say their defense is good. Like they have a good defense, but the offense is not great, and the special teams have been kind of and even the defense, like as great as they have been for most of the year, like they traded away Bradley Chubb. Like I don't know, man. Broncos are. This is one of those times where I don't know. I got it so wrong before the season. I think most people did, but like it's crazy how wrong everyone's been on this team. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember injuries have played a factor too. Lost Tim Pat. They've lost a lot of receiver depth, which is supposed to be their strength. Lost Latavius Garrett Bowles, who was a bright spot in their offense, and lost wrong running back, Javonte Williams. But yeah, I mean, to make it feel a little better, once again, I don't think anyone would have predicted this, especially out of the offense. And yeah, I mean, I don't know the fix. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe as much as I love Nathaniel Hackett, I think he deserves a head coaching job, or at least an offensive coordinator position. And I think he deserves more time. But if the Broncos let go of him, mainly for those reasons, that's understandable, because yeah, like they've kind of dug this hole. And granted, they got themselves a little bit out of it by trading away Bradley Chubb. Like you mentioned, like Bradley Chubb was a known commodity. He was solid. Like you don't know that first round pick that you're getting back if that's going to be an impact player, because we know you can hit or miss in the first round. So who knows how it will happen there. But yeah, I mean, I do want to give a little bit credit to the Panthers. Yeah, still interim head coach, and there's quietly, chugging along. Deontay Foreman, hopefully this will net him a job, because I feel like last year did really well with the Titans, and obviously doing great here with the Panthers, and everyone criticizes their O-line too, and he's been for the most part averaging over 100 yards per game, being the main bell cow. So hopefully for him, he can get a job somewhere as the guy, if not here. Good to see DJ Moore, a little bit of resurgence there, for 103 and a touchdown. But although Sam Darnold did good, even though one of our friends is still holding on to Sam Darnold stock, like, I mean, I think he's just a filler quarterback at this point, as we've all kind of seen with Sam Darnold. So good win, though, for the Panthers, build some confidence. Hey, maybe Steve Wilkes, right? He's their interim head coach, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully, maybe this will net him the full-time job, because like I mentioned whenever the Matt Rule firing video, hey, Wilkes never really got a full fair shake in Arizona. He only got 1 year, and that was with Josh Rosen, and we all saw how Josh Rosen turned out. So, hey, maybe he gets a second chance here or elsewhere. But regardless, he's been doing a pretty good job with the Panthers. And for Denver, yeah, I mean, who knows how to fix it there. So good win for them. And also, by the way, do want to throw out the Panthers. My baller of the week, Brian Burns, kind of one of the more under-talked about edge guys. He's been, had 2 sacks this game. And just been unfortunate that he's been in Carolina and they haven't been really relevant, because he's been really good. He's been a hit for them out on the edge. He's probably going to, I'm not sure if he's been paid yet, but he'll probably be commanding a payday here soon. I know he's getting to that point, because my Packers have to pay Rashawn Gary, and they're in the same draft class. So, yeah, hopefully he can, get a good fat payday. But regardless, for him, he's my defensive baller of the week. So there is that. Now we move on to another surprise of the week, and that was the Cleveland Browns. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 23-17. Especially late, they scored the last 13 points too, 6 in overtime, 7 in the fourth quarter. But yeah, John, definitely a shocker here. What were your thoughts in regards to the Browns upsetting the Bucs?
Obviously the Bucs are not the Bucs of old. Nick Chubb had his absolute way on the ground, 116 rushing yards. He got a touchdown. He did it on 26 carries. He controlled this game, and shout out to Amari Cooper. He showed up big time in, a game where they needed him, especially in overtime. He had that big catch to get him down to what it was, the 2-yard line that allowed Nick Chubb to punch it in to end the game. So Amari Cooper, had a great day. David Njoku finally back from injury, had that crazy one-handed catch in the end zone. So it just seems like the Browns are starting to kind of get right, as the season's coming to an end. For the Buccaneers, unfortunate loss, especially considering that, some of their division rivals, actually not some of them. I think it was literally just the Panthers won this week. But it makes the division race a little closer because now the Panthers are sitting at 4-8, and things are getting a little more nerve-wracking for the Buccaneers because they're 5-6. The Falcons are 5-7. Even the Saints are 4-8. Like literally anybody could win that division at this point. And a win here could have been pretty crucial for the Buccaneers because they could have started to build momentum. They beat Seattle last week. They come out here and win this game, but they couldn't do it. The Browns, like I said, the key was their run game because the Buccaneers, the run defense has kind of been their thing. And although this year they haven't been as impressive in years past, they were still good, but the Browns were just better. Because honestly, offensively, there wasn't really anything that stood out about the Bucs that were like, okay, wow, Brady threw a couple picks or anything. No, Brady had a pretty good game. Rashad White had a pretty solid game running, which is good because the Buccaneers, for most of the year, have been really inefficient. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry, so he had a good day. The only thing that really stands out is that Mike Evans didn't really have that big of an impact, but Chris Godwin had 110 receiving yards and a touchdown, so he kind of made up for it. It was simply just the Browns coming out and being the better team. So shout out to the Browns because this is a pretty big win for them. And next week we got Deshaun Watson coming back, so maybe they can build some momentum. They're not technically ruled out of the wild card race if they could, run the table or something crazy. It's unlikely, but it's possible.
Yeah, I want to add the biggest shock for me was just that Tampa Bay, they had success in the run game. I'm surprised they weren't a little more patient throughout the whole day. Now, granted, maybe the fact that there was no Leonard Fournette too, he definitely would have been loved this game to be their sledgehammer because Cleveland's run defense has been a huge issue for them for basically all year. And Tampa Bay, like you mentioned, kind of had some momentum going into this game running the ball. Thought they'd lean on that more. You mentioned that Godwin kind of balanced out Mike Evans not being effective. I mean, still though, you still felt that Mike Evans, maybe I love Mike Evans, but maybe he's starting to hit that decline. Who knows? And maybe this offense too, it just doesn't seem as explosive and as dangerous as it has in past 2 years. Now, granted, too, they're missing pieces on the O-line than they have in previous years, like you mentioned, and maybe become more of a run or a defensive oriented team with Todd Bowles, as their head coach. Which once again, why I'm just a little bit shocked as to why there wasn't more of a balance between run pass because they 43 pass attempts, technically 46 because Brady got sacked 3 times to 20 rushes. It hasn't really been their formula, and they were leading going into the fourth quarter by 7. Heck, Cleveland hadn't scored going to the fourth quarter since the first quarter. So the Bucs defense, I'm not going to say here, granted the run defense is a concern, which is what, like he's already alluded to, a little shocking to say considering their track record in previous years. So not really sure how they've addressed that, but yeah, and they're a crazy division. And once again, we've seen this before with the Bucs, although once again, a better team when they won the Super Bowl. They just got to get in the dance, maybe get hot late. But yeah, definitely not looking like that may be the case as much as time has got on here. Like I mentioned, Godwin, he had a solid game, but Mike Evans really hasn't been as eye-popping as he has been in previous years. Leonard Fournette in and out, and this offensive line still a bit patchwork. And yeah, hopefully they can get that run defense addressed because oddly enough, it's kind of been a switch. Their pass defense has been solid, but now their run defense isn't as great. So we'll see if they can bounce back. Like you mentioned, they're still technically in control of that weird division that is the NFC South. And for the Browns, maybe they can build some momentum going to the offseason or run the table. Who knows? But that is that. Now we go over to kind of another defensive / ugliest game. And it was the Washington Commanders. They beat the Atlanta Falcons 19-13. I'm just stick with the game here. What were your thoughts in regards to this one?
There was nothing that really was crazy about this game. It was kind of just the Commanders, executing when they needed to. Brian Robinson had a really good game. He's been largely inefficient on the year, and he was, kind of coming back from the injury. It was really impressive how quickly he came back. And so this was a really encouraging game for him because he had 105 rushing yards, averaged 5.8 yards per carry, which is way better than he'd been doing for most of the year. And he did have that one receiving touchdown where he just bulldozed somebody. So shout out to Brian Robinson because I think he was sort of the player of the game here. Heineke, didn't have the greatest of games, only 130 yards, an interception, but they were relying on the run. He still had 2 touchdown passes, so that was good. But mostly it was their defense that stepped up. They were in that backfield all day against Marcus Mariota. He had 174 passing yards, a touchdown, and interception. They did run the ball well for the most part. They had like 160, 170 rushing yards. But it's sort of the tale of like bend, don't break. They didn't allow a single rushing touchdown, and simply put, any time the Falcons were getting, towards the end of the field, Washington stood strong and was able to hold on. So shout out to the Washington defense because I think they were the reason they won this game, them and Brian Robinson.
Yeah, not much else to add. I mean, kind of a ugly game between the two, but yeah, I think you already hit the nail on the head. Kind of saw the missing of Kyle Pitts, although Michael Pruitt basically filled the Kyle Pitts role with his 2 receptions, 9 yards, touchdown. That's basically what Kyle Pitts has done all year, stat-wise, obviously, but his impact goes beyond that. Yeah, not much to add. Like you already mentioned, great to see Brian Robinson not only playing, but balling too. And Antonio Gibson too, contributing a little bit as well. So, hey, not pretty, but like we mentioned with the Bills one, like you win this one, you move on, you learn from it. And like Washington, we all know they're not the greatest show on turf. They're not the most dominant team on either side of the ball, but they're finding ways to win. And then, hey, we've seen crazier things happen. So they're still very much in the mix at 7-5. And like you mentioned for Atlanta, although they lost, still very much in the mix within their own division. So they still have hope, plenty of hope going forward. But now we go to an AFC matchup, and it was a pretty interesting one, a rematch of last year's wild card matchup between the Titans and the Bengals. And once again, the Bengals prevailed, although this time Joe Burrow did not need to be sacked 9 times. He only got sacked once, so bigger improvement there. No Joe Mixon, though, no problem. And it seemed also no Jamar Chase either, because he was expected to play, but they held him out. But yeah, I think the biggest story, too, is they held Derrick Henry down. What were your thoughts in regards to the Bengals kind of out Tennessee?
Yeah, the game was won in the trenches. The Bengals, actually, I kind of looked into it because I actually felt a little guilty. I've been talking bad about the Bengals offensive line even recently, but the last month or so, they've kind of quietly put together a really solid outing. And I think this game was sort of the cherry on top of that. Like you said, they only allowed 1 sack. They didn't have the greatest outing in terms of like the run game, but in terms of protecting Joe Burrow, they gave him time in this one, and that's what they were brought in to do. And you're without Joe Mixon, you're without Jamar Chase, without a lot of key players, and they managed to win. And this is why you go get that elite level quarterback, because Joe Burrow showed up. Once again, didn't have that much of a run game. Also, shout out to all the people who say that T. Higgins is not good enough to be a wide receiver 1. Like, the guy is a baller, 7 catches, 114 yards, and a touchdown in this one. I know Jamar Chase is incredibly talented, and I think Jamar Chase is a better receiver than T. Higgins, but let's not disrespect T. Higgins. Like, the guy, if he was on a lot of other teams, could be the top receiver. He just happens to be playing alongside a guy who's, just an absolute monster in Jamar Chase. So shout out to T. Higgins because he had a big day. But like I said, the game was won in the trenches. Like you mentioned, they completely shut down Derrick Henry. Like, to beat the Titans, that's what you have to do, and that's what they did. Now, he did have 79 receiving yards, and it is really unfortunate for him, at least, that he did fumble on the 1 yard line, which Treylon Burks picked up. So he didn't get the touchdown. But they shut him down in the run game. He only averaged 2.2 yards per carry on 17 carries. Like, that's a really impressive performance from the Cincinnati defense. And if they can do that moving forward, I mean, listen, they're sitting at 7-4. A lot of people have kind of forgotten about the Cincinnati Bengals. because, they haven't had all the crazy flashiness that they had last year, but they're getting reinforcements. Jamar Chase is going to be coming back this next week, assuming that nothing changes. The Bengals said they expect him to be coming back this next week. Joe Mixon's supposed to be coming back this next week. Like, they're getting reinforcements late here, and they could make a pretty late run, potentially even for that division title.
Yeah, I don't have much to add what you said. I mean, see T. Higgins go off, it's like bittersweet because obviously I'm rooting for T. Higgins. I'm not rooting against him, but I'm always going to flash back to to Packers grabbing Jordan Love. T. Higgins was on the board. Although, I will talk about the game later. Maybe it won't hurt as much down the line. But at least right now, I'm like, man, like, would be nice to have T. Higgins in our receiving room, along with Christian Watson and such. But yeah, great to see him balling out, like John mentioned. I mean, almost any other offense, he's the number one guy. It just happens to be next to the super freak, and I say that respectfully, and Jamar Chase. So, but yeah, I think too, you mentioned this Cincinnati's kind of flying under the radar. I mean, their defense too, kind of flying under the radar. I know there's no sexy names to be say. I mean, maybe Jesse Bates, but who knows? He may be gone after this season. But yeah, just a kind of New Englandy in the fact that they've got a good collection of a lot of guys that can do different things. And yeah, so I just want to give credit to them too. And although Tennessee did lose, nice to see Treylon Burks. He's been kind of coming along. I know it's not amazing, eye-popping, but, against my Packers the previous week, had 100 yards receiving. This week, had 4 for 70. So he's starting to become their main guy. Although, once again, I'm not trying to dog on Treylon. Completely different person, different player, but would have missed A.J. Brown this game, a game where no Derrick Henry isn't as effective. This is where you wish he had A.J. Brown to maybe add some explosiveness, maybe make a play on his own that he would have done in previous years with Tennessee. But they made their decision. They didn't want to pay him, and that's sitting in that bed that they made. So big win, like John mentioned, for the Bengals. They're staying relevant in their division and in the AFC in general. For Tennessee, not a tough, not the worst loss, but hey, you obviously want to win every week. So we'll see how they bounce back going forward. But now we go to probably the more exciting games of the week. I did the Bleacher Report perfect picks thing, and I picked this game to be the highest scoring, and I think it was, if I remember correctly, by 1 point. But yeah, this game was wild between the Seahawks and the Las Vegas Raiders. Another game that went to overtime, but it was Josh Jacobs' show as he went crazy. John, what were your thoughts in regards to the Raiders getting this huge win against Seattle, at Seattle too?
Listen, I saw some tweets that were saying declining Josh Jacobs' fifth-year option has essentially turned him into prime Walter Payton. And, I mean, the guy is balling out. Like, he had, 309 yards or something like that? I mean, 303, 320, or somewhere around there. Anyway, over 300 yards. He had 2 touchdowns rushing, and he's my baller of the week. Like, I mean, you knew that one of us was going to put him on here after this monster day. 33 carries, 229 rushing yards, 7 yards a carry for 2 touchdowns, and also 6 catches. The second most on the team, 74 yards, tied for the most on the team. I mean, like, he was the offense today, and that was the reason they won, honestly. Seattle, they tried to keep up. They weren't able to have that much success in the run game. Kenneth Walker has... I don't entirely blame it on him, but like the run game as a whole for Seattle has been very inefficient the last month or so. Kenneth Walker specifically is averaging 3 yards per carry over his last 4 games. Like, Seattle's just got to kind of figure out something in this run game because it's starting to slow down. It's not working as well. Geno Smith is still playing well. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are still playing well, but the run game is slowing down, and I think that's sort of limiting their ceiling right now and why they're starting to fall behind a bit, especially against like Tampa last week and now the Raiders in this one, because they weren't able to control the clock whatsoever. And so if they wanted to score, they had to do it through the air, and that allowed the Raiders a lot of time to do what they want to do offensively as well. So yeah, the Raiders, I think shout out to Josh McDaniels. Although they haven't had the greatest of seasons and they've had their ups and downs and they've gotten all these big leads, this is one of those games where, okay, if you choke this one, like, this is going to look bad because you've been choking a lot of games recently. They managed to figure it out. They got the win at the end there, and that was on the back of Josh Jacobs. And Josh Jacobs, the Raiders should trust because he's having a monster year, and I think he can carry them as the season goes on to a potentially strong finish here Because once again, they're not eliminated from things. Like if they run the table, the wild card could be in play. I'm not saying it's going to happen. You're 4-7, but if you win your next 6, you could finish the year 10-7. We've seen crazy things happen before.
In regards to Josh Jacobs, also want to throw out too, maybe another reason probably why he's kind of having a bounce back year as someone who owned him in fantasy and was high on him coming out of the draft. Like, this is the first year too. He's been relatively healthy. Last few years, been dealing with different injuries, and he would play through them. And I think it helps when you have an offensive mind. Not that Gruden was in bad offensive mind, but another one in Josh McDaniels finding ways to move the ball through the air, but also get Jacobs involved in the passing game too. I mean, you mentioned that he had 303 total yards. 74 is out on the ground, 6 receptions. I mean, even Gruden said at that point. He said before last season too, like that he could see Josh Jacobs being a Kamara type role. Not saying he's gonna, and obviously he hasn't lived up to that. But if Gruden said that, obviously he has some receiving potential, and we hadn't really seen that until obviously this game. But in regards to him being fully healthy too, you see, especially on the 86-yard run, but even on other runs, you see the burst that he had his rookie year and the power that he runs with. So it's good to see him healthy, and it'll be interesting to see if he does get paid or if he moves on. And it was good for Derek Carr too, and he didn't have this. He threw a couple interceptions, but still kept his team in the game. But in regards to Seattle, I thought they'd be more patient.
Real quick, did you see on Derek Carr's second interception that a Seahawks player ran off the sideline and started blocking?
Yeah, apparently, yeah. Like some people were, I'm not sure if he said. Some people said like, yes, maybe he thought the play was dead and he was running on to celebrate.
He thought the play was dead and he ran on to celebrate, but then he's just on the field and like the guy's running, and so maybe adrenaline kicked in.
It's surprising that once again, like no refs caught that, and like I'll be interested to see if they'll probably get like a little fine. You're like, hey, like 5,000, come on.
That's something I don't blame the refs for catching, because like also on those plays like you're kind of scrambling, like you're not looking
especially
at the
since the play's not dead. Yeah, so they're focused on the play itself, not on if someone's going to run off the sideline. And especially it's just one person too, so it's like and he already had his helmet on. He wasn't like putting it on. He was like game ready basically. So it looked like he was just part of the play. So I can't fault him too much.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't see that live. I saw it afterwards, but I didn't notice on the second one. But yeah, in regards to Seattle, like I wish they'd be a little more patient with the run, because even when they haven't been efficient, like Kenneth Walker, we've seen he's got home run ability, and maybe you just stay patient with it, and maybe he finds a seam and breaks one open. Felt they got a little too pass happy. I know they were down for parts of the game. It was a back and forth shootout, but I mean, give your defense a little bit of a break too, Seattle. Like I know Raiders defense ain't great, but your defense, at least especially on that day, was not very good. And outside really of the 2 turnovers, I mean, Las Vegas did whatever they wanted offensively, as we all saw, especially Josh Jacobs. So, it's one of those where I probably should have thought about that, but I thought Seattle's offense would, especially if you tell me that they won the turnover battle too, I would have expected that, technically I guess it tied. Gino did fumble and lost the fumble, so technically tied, but a little bit shocking there, but nonetheless, a huge win for the Raiders, and great to see Josh Jacobs ball out. I believe he is your baller, right? Did you claim him for offensive? So there you go.
Yeah, I did.
So yeah, like John mentioned, 303 total yards, 229 on the ground, 2 touchdowns, and added 6 and 74 receiving wise. So great to see him balling out. And like I said, hey, maybe they make a run. If not, maybe they can at least finish the season strong and re-sign Josh Jacobs, get some more pieces that Josh McDaniels wants to utilize. Hopefully hit on their draft picks too, because they haven't, in a Gruden Mayock era, they didn't really hit on them, as we've mentioned before. So that will definitely help them in the long run. But big win for the Raiders. Seahawks still in the NFC race, but definitely this loss hurts them going forward. But now we go over to another game that was close, determined late by a 2-point conversion, and that was the LA Chargers. They snuck by the Arizona Cardinals 25-24. A lot closer game than I expected, but Justin Herbert pulled this one out at the end. Like I said, Chargers went for 2 also, kind of like with the Jags. Went for it, got it, and they ended up winning. What were your thoughts in regards to the Chargers win over the Cardinals?
This was a good win, and like I said about Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, I mean, Justin Herbert didn't need a statement win, But this was a statement win for him because he's been getting a lot of flack recently, especially from Emmanuel Acho, who I'm not the biggest fan of. But it's not because I'm a Justin Herbert fan. I just don't agree with a lot of his philosophies on the way he evaluates quarterbacks specifically. But Justin Herbert balled out in this one. Like, I keep mentioning these quarterbacks winning games despite no run game. Like, you know how hard it is to probably play your position when half of your offense is just non-existent? Like, they had 27 rushing yards that was not from Justin Herbert. Herbert ran for 38 of them. So he himself ran for more rushing yards than the entire running back room, which they barely ran the ball. I don't know why they did that. Like, Eckler had 5 carries for 20 yards. That's 4 yards a carry. That's pretty good. Like, it's not terrible. Josh Kelly had 2 carries. Isaiah Spiller had 2 carries. So they only ran the ball with their running backs 9 times. That's kind of confusing. I don't understand that coaching decision. But they won the game, so I guess whatever. But, you know, like Justin Herbert, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns, like the game-winning drive. Like, the Justin Herbert haters, I don't understand. Like, he had a great game here. Give him his props, his credit, because he was the reason they won this one. Because, you know, their defense, they were all right, and I do want to give a shout-out specifically to Derwin James. He got an interception. He forced a fumble. He had 8 tackles, played a key role in this win. But even then, their defense wasn't lights out outside of the interception. Like, you know, Kyler Murray was able to have some success. James Conner was running all over that defense. DeAndre Hopkins was able to do well. Like, you know, the Cardinals were still able to move the ball somewhat offensively and have some success. It was just Justin Herbert came out and he was better. And the defense got their one stop that they needed to with that interception. So, yeah, good win for the Chargers. This one I think was pretty crucial too because if they lost, they fall to below 500. This keeps their playoff hopes alive, and hopefully for their sake, they can get Joey Bosa, Mike Williams, some of these injured guys back pretty soon, and potentially make a playoff run. So shout out to the Chargers and Derwin James, my defensive baller of the week.
Yeah, all I want to add is, I mean, once again, more credit to Herbert. I mean, 35 completions for 274 yards. Once again, shows the fact that we've been trying to make. Like, there's no explosiveness to the offense. It's a lot of Herbert fitting in these short throws, you know, short to maybe intermediate throws. You know, obviously they're missing Mike Williams as probably their best deep threat, even though, once again, not really his speedster, just more because of his size. And especially, you already mentioned too, no run game either. Like, it was all on Herbert, and he delivered. And on the flip side, although Arizona ran the ball pretty well, which, once again, they're surprisingly a little bit patient with it. They didn't have anything off of it. I mean, Kyler had a solid game, but even then, after, I think, that press conference too, he mentioned, like, he basically called out the scheme for kind of failing them, something we've been saying about Cliff Kingsbury and the gang. So we'll see how long this Cliff Kingsbury train lasts, but 4-8, outside looking in on their division too, and probably, you know, not going to make the playoffs, definitely on the far side of that. We'll see what happens there, but yeah, huge win for the Chargers. Wasn't pretty by any means, like we already mentioned. Took that late 2-point conversion, but once again, I know I criticize Brandon Staley, but that was a moment where I'm like, yeah, I'm all for it, because you put the pressure on the other team. Hey, if you don't make it, well, you save yourself over time, especially as you get into later in the season, especially the Chargers, because they deal with a lot of injuries. So they're probably like, we do not need to play another 10 minutes. Let's just try to, you know, they're not at home too, so, you know, you just scored a touchdown, so maybe get that, you know, stay on top of that momentum and try to put the pressure on them. So big win for the Chargers. They, you know, we mentioned other teams trying to stay alive in the AFC playoff race. You know, they're 6-5. They're still kind of in the middle of that, especially the wild card. So we'll see if they can keep that train going along. But now we go over to San Francisco, where the Niners, they skunked the Saints 13-0. So obviously great performance by their defense. Any other thoughts in regards to this one, John?
Which game are we on? Sorry, real quick.
Sorry, San Francisco Saints. San Francisco 49ers beat Saints 13-0 as our...
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. The Saints are just not a very good football team. They don't have a lot going on for them right now. Still, like, I don't know. I think at this point, there's no reason to not give Jameis a chance, because, like, Andy Dalton's kind of having up and down performances, but it's more down than up. He didn't have like a terrible game here, but he just didn't do a whole lot to really win you this one. And it sucks because they also, once again, had no run game. There's a lot of teams this week that just had no run game. Like Alvin Kamara, 13 yards, Taysom Hill, 13 yards, Mark Ingram, 10 yards. Like they put up like 40 rushing yards total as a team. And so I don't even fully blame Andy Dalton for this performance because he was the leading rusher again. And it's hard to win like that. Like that's on the offensive coordinator. That's on the offensive line. That's on even the ball carriers. Like there's a lot of blame to go around in this one for the Saints. And for Saints fans, I feel for you because you probably have no hope at this point. Like you just got shut out. And like your defense played well. Like they held the Niners to only 13 points, which is pretty good because the Niners have all those weapons with Kittle and Ayuk and McCaffrey and Debo, and you held them to 13 points. And your offense just wasn't able to score even a single point. Like I'll eat my L on this one because I did think that there was not going to be that much of a difference between the Saints without Sean Payton, because I felt like with the amount of experience this coaching staff had, considering that like their offensive coordinator's been with Sean Payton since they won the Super Bowl. Like Dennis Allen has, been a head coach previously, and he had this defense in a really strong spot. I thought this team would, continue to be solid. They're bad. Like that's as plain as you can put it. They're just not very good.
Yeah, it seems like they're missing a lot of Payton, especially against elite defenses. It seems like a lot of Payton's, special plays or just concepts that, maybe he brought to the table. Didn't help too that Kamara fumbled twice this one. You mentioned, there's not much hope for the Saints. Be interested to see if, if Kamara's a guy that's on the block, although he has that legal situation coming up, so that could hurt his value. And other than that, like what other trade pieces do they really have? Like maybe Lattimore, unless they've already paid him, I guess, do they want to get rid of Cam Jordan, who's been a staple there for a long? Like, that's a question I have to decide. Yeah, so a lot of question marks for them going forward, and I expect too they may need to bring in another offensive mind because, like you've already mentioned, alluded to, this offense is just taking a huge step back from what it was from Sean Payton, and also too, regardless, Sean Payton just had a great way of getting the lesser guys involved and just maximizing their usage and their potential. We'd always see like the Traquan Smiths of the world. He'd have a game or two, or tight end here or that. Obviously they're missing that, but like you mentioned, credit their defense. Their defense, for the most part, did their job. It made life tough on the Niners. Like we've mentioned, it's very tough to handle this team. Oh, you got Christian McCaffrey on the run and pass game, and then same with Deebo Samuel. They contained them. Even Kittle didn't have much of a game here. Ayuk was their leading receiver, and it's not like he killed them either. So, we'll see what happens with the Saints do. What direction they'll take in the offseason. But for the Niners, once they're just chugging along, getting these wins. Jimmy G, didn't make any mistakes. Typical Jimmy G type performance that they've been wanting or need from. Just don't make mistakes, make a few plays, and we'll move on. We'll probably win because we're a very talented and well-coached team. So, good for them. We'll see, though. McCaffrey did get a little nicked, so he may not. I think his status is a little bit up in the air for next week, but
also,
long-term, he's fine.
Unfortunately for Elijah Mitchell, same injury that he had earlier in the year, so he's now once again out for another 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, so so he's out for some time. So maybe I think it's undrafted rookie, I believe is what he was, but Jordan Mason may be the guy. But knowing Shanahan, he'll be fine because Shanahan finds these guys and makes them work all the time, and they still have Debo. So good win for the Niners there as they continue to climb up the NFC. Now we go to their division counterpart, the LA Rams, which, as expected, they really struggled and they lost against the Chiefs 26-10. Chiefs took care of business. Any thoughts, comments in regards to this win?
No, I have nothing to say about this game, really. Chiefs, far superior team for the Rams. Just shut it down for Stafford and Kupp and all these guys. Like they've left a window open that they're going to come back. Just shut it down. Like it's not worth it at this point. This is the worst Super Bowl hangover I've ever seen. I think it's probably the worst Super Bowl hangover ever. Like it's bad.
Yeah, I mean Bryce Perkins out there for quarterback, that says a lot. I think I did see in regards to you saying shutting it down. I did see. I think Aaron Donald's maybe dealing with ankle injury, so they're probably going to shut him down.
Shut it down. Anybody that's worth anything, shut it down.
Yeah, I think Allen Robinson, I know he's not worth much, but he got shut down too, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like we mentioned before, just a little bit unfortunate. They lost a lot of what little key pieces they had. They weren't a very deep team, so losing those key pieces, they weren't able to fill them in, and I think that's been a big issue. But yeah, credit the Chiefs. I mean, they took care of business. Rams defense is still pretty good. They still have Jalen Ramsey. They still have some key pieces there, obviously. So not too shocked that Kansas City didn't completely run over them. Mahomes threw a pick too. But end of the day, Chiefs, they got the win when they needed to, and they're getting valuable experience for some of these guys while while some of their other receivers are out. Mecole Hardman, we're seeing more Sky Moore recently. He's been getting involved, and it seems like too that they're just completely leaning on Isaiah Pacheco, and he's giving them a really good power to their run game, something that they really haven't had in recent years. So that'll be interesting to see going down the stretch because he adds that closing game element of just being a nasty downhill runner that no one really wants to tackle. So Chiefs take care of business and they cover the spread for us. So that was big. Now we go to the Sunday night game where my Green Bay Packers play the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot closer than I expected. And thank God for the 0.5 because I picked Philly. You picked Green Bay. Just barely covered. Even with the missed extra points too. Mason Crosby makes his, one of them. Anyway, but even though it was a close-ish game, Eagles were really in control for the most part of this game, especially in in the second half. Rodgers left with the rib-ish injury. He says he might be fine for Sunday. Nonetheless, though, a little bit of concern for the Eagles defense as Green Bay was able to put some points on them. Got away with it this week, though, John. Their offense did a lot. What were your thoughts in regards to the Eagles win here?
Yeah, I don't know. The Eagles, they're in a weird spot where I've started to feel like they're playing to the level of their opponent. Like, they're squeaking out these wins, but in this game, okay, the Packers are going to put up 33. They beat them by, they put up 40. All right, they play, the Texans. They barely beat them. They play the Colts. They barely beat them. Like, they're just in this weird spot. Like, you're getting the wins, and that's good, but you're playing to the level of your opponent. And if you play to an opponent that's very good, that kind of shuts you down on that thing, that could bode poorly for them. So I don't know. If I'm an Eagles fan, I'm happy that they're winning, which I'm obviously not an Eagles fan, but if hypothetically I was, I'd be happy they're winning, but I'd be a little concerned right now that the consistency just feels a little wonky. Like, they're having these weird games where, like, the defense does good, but the offense does bad. And they're having these games where the defense is terrible, but the offense does good. So you want the full package. You want both. Once again, it's the regular season. It's the middle of the year. Doesn't really matter that much, but I do think that, at least as of right now, the old metaphor of like the sharks, they can smell the blood in the water. And I think that the Eagles, they're showing the NFL a lot of tape on how to beat them, both in how to shut down their offense, like we saw the Colts do last week, and how to beat this defense, like we saw the Packers do this week. So I don't know. I'm not saying the Eagles are frauds by any means, but I do think that they're showing some holes.
Yeah, I think a little bit of it too is a little too simplistic on defense at times. It doesn't feel like they're doing a lot of creative things there. I've mentioned before, I think their linebackers can be had. So the intermediate to middle of the field, especially in the passing game, can be had. But two, I think I will say the offense, obviously the run game. I'm glad to see them just fully lean on that. Granted, Green Bay kind of helped them with that. It wasn't until basically second quarter, third quarter that we started loading the box, especially since Jalen Hurts had 100 yards in the first quarter alone, which says everything. It gave me nightmare flashbacks of Colin Kaepernick, which is funny because they mentioned, I think after the, towards the end of the game when they reached the mark, because Hurts and Sanders, I think, were the second running back quarterback duo to both have 125 yards rushing. The other one was Colin Kaepernick and Frank Gore, which I wouldn't be shocked if that game was against us also, because everyone remembers Kaepernick dominated us pretty much every time he played. He was a nightmare. But it was great to see them lean on their offensive line, especially, for the most part. I like what their offense did, and I think it's important to factor into AJ Brown had a fumble when they were in scoring territory that was returned, and Green Bay was right there on the door again to score, so that helped us. But other than that, although the score is close, I think Green Bay was never really in command of this game. Like you mentioned, concerning about the defense. Hopefully they, get a little creative as time goes on. Maybe, get these new guys antiquated with the team. And it was nice to see Jordan Love. His that touchdown drive was pretty good. He did pretty solid, let's say. He gave me a little bit of hope. He texted me, I think we texted in our group chat, what did the Packers do first rounder? I said, at the time, best available, even quarterback, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, we're going to be gunning for it, but especially if we get out of this, as I expect, we lose another game or two, we're out of the playoff picture. Much I love Aaron, I think we got to see a little bit of Jordan. You know what I mean? Like, we have to see what we invested this first round pick in, at least for a couple games, not just one drive against the Eagles late in the game when they're playing off coverage.
That's the question I want to ask you here before we move on to the next game is, obviously, Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. Jordan Love comes in. A lot of people were impressed. Like, we haven't really got to see a lot of Jordan Love. And so I think that a lot of people were impressed with the little bit that we saw, especially like that one throw on the touchdown. Like, that was a pretty tough throw, and he made it happen. So now, obviously, very limited sample size, but now we get into that weird situation where, like, doesn't Jordan Love have to be extended after this year? Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I think maybe we have to,
or he has the 5th-year option, so you like the negotiations are open up or something like that. Anyway, like, you're starting to see, like, all right, well, like, do we want to see more Jordan Love playing? The Packers, what is y'all's record now? You fall to 4-8.
4-8.
Once again, not eliminated from anything, but 9-8 is also a little bit of a tougher task to ask for a wild card spot, especially with like how the NFC picture is sort of shaping up. So if it was up to you, would you Aaron Rodgers said he's playing next week, but would you shut down Aaron Rodgers maybe for the rest of the year and just see what you have in Jordan Love?
I definitely would. I mean, everyone already knows I'm kind of, not a catastrophist, but I feel like I've been pretty realistic, objective about my Packers. That's why I tried. It's very hard to always do that with your team. I feel like that's our strengths here. And, I mean, like I said, we're not really even in control of this game. I know Rodgers, one of the picks was bad. The other one, especially if you watch from the all 22 angle, like, couldn't really see that Eagles defender, so really can't put down Rodgers. Also, the fact that dealing with the thumb injury, I know Aaron's been downplaying and such, but especially if he does plan to play next year, or even if he doesn't, because especially if he doesn't, like I said, you have to see what you have in Jordan Love, and you have to see him struggle. You have to see him, go through all the motions to see, what you need to work on too. Because once again, like, he hasn't gotten much even playing time. You only seen him in limited preseason action. One game against the Chiefs, but that was still, I feel like a million years ago. So yeah, if I was in charge of the Packers, I would, tell Aaron, hey, look, go have some ayahuasca, just chill out the rest of the year. Like, we're not risking you, whether you want to be here or not, or regardless if you want to be a trade or whatever. We're not risking you. We need to see what we have in Jordan, since we traded up and got him and he's a first round pick on him. So yeah, I am of the camp. Just let Jordan play, because it's the Bears, Rams, Dolphins. This could be an interesting one. That's a good test for Jordan on Christmas. Vikings, hey, that might have some implications for the Vikings. So, you know what I mean? Some games where you're playing some teams that are going to probably bring it in regards to, they have some things on the line. So it'd be nice to see Jordan play some games where, it's pressure moments, critical situations. Okay, how does he react? How does he respond in those moments? So yeah, that's what I would do. Long answer.
Just update on the contract situation. He's got this year. Then this is his third year. Then next year's fourth year. And then so it's about picking up the 4th year option / extension, all that kind of stuff.
5th year, right? 5th year.
Sorry, 5th year option. Yeah. So he would have, after this year, he has 2 more years technically if they pick up the option. So it's not tons of pressure to play right away.
But that could be key in regards to, because I think you have to pick it up before the start of next season.
Right. And so that's why it's like you kind of want to see him play. Anyway, I agree with you. I would personally shut down Aaron Rodgers, just because what do you have to gain from playing him? Also, like you mentioned, the schedule. If it was like an easy week schedule, then maybe you're like, let's make a run here. But you said the Dolphins, the Vikings, like, these are some good teams here that if you drop those 2 games, the best you could do is 7-10. Like, you're not making the playoffs there. Like, even if you drop 1 game going 8-9, that's a tough ask to say you're gonna make the playoffs with that.
Sorry, and just to add on, like, we have the Bears this upcoming week, which I expect we'll probably win with Aaron, but then a bye week too. So, like, yes, we win, we're 5-8, but we could be eliminated by then. So yeah, it would be the bye week although it sucks it's late because it doesn't help us this year, it could help with another week of preparation for Jordan, because then he plays, like I mentioned, the Rams at Miami and then Vikings and Lions at the end of the year. So like, yeah, it has potential to like have some ups and downs, but you know, some highs and lows. Like some good defenses, and then the Lions defense, which we all know is not great. So
all right, and then just follow-up question 2. Obviously, there's plenty of time to think this over, especially considering Jordan Love's contract. But regardless of if Jordan Love was to play well or not, do you think the Packers should potentially explore trading Aaron Rodgers in the future, or do you ride with him?
I love Aaron, but roster presently constructed, and even thinking ahead, I think we got to move on. Like, we got to move on from him. I love Aaron, but he's in the win now mode, and for some reason, Green Bay is never really in a win now mode. We're always, even when we were in our championship, we're always thinking 4 years ahead, which can be great at times, but can also not be great, as we've seen recently. If he can find a package, I would trade him, but like we talked about too in our group chat, his contract makes it difficult, and the fact that, you know, he's kind of had a down year, and you know, he's getting older, so yeah, if you have an offer, you know, even just one or maybe 2 first-round picks, I would take it, and especially if you get to see what you have from Jordan, maybe, you know, once again, that's why I'm more for that, because 2, I mean, let's not rule out Rodgers may retire. He already kind of has already hinted at it. So, you know, maybe he might see it this year and be like, man, like, we're not really close to, I really want to gut it out another year. So, yeah, I would, if Aaron continues to play, if the possibility's there, I would move on from Aaron, much as I love him. But
yeah, I personally, I mean, I'm not a Packers fan, so my opinion doesn't really matter, but I would agree, just because, I don't know, it's like, all right, can we win a Super Bowl with this team? If you don't feel that confident, then you might as well make a move that would benefit you massively in the future. I know that a lot of people want to have the loyalty and all that kind of stuff, but as we're seeing with teams like the Seahawks or the Lions, like, making that trade, as much as it sucks to trade a guy who's been sort of the face of your franchise, even in Russell Wilson's case, 1 year Super Bowl, oftentimes the team that gets all those draft picks is going to come out on top, because they've now set themselves up for a much faster rebuild. And like, best case scenario for the Packers, Jordan Love actually does turn out to be like a baller. You can surround him really quickly with pieces and maybe even try to compete really soon. And I know that would suck, because obviously you would sit there and think like, oh man, like, why couldn't we have done this Aaron Rodgers? Well, once again, that would only really be possible because of you know, potentially trading him and getting a lot of quick, you know, talent in high draft capital. So I don't know, just interesting scenario, because I do think if Aaron Rodgers was to get, you know, miss any time or get shut down, and Jordan Love does start to look good, this could be a conversation that people start to have pretty soon here, if that happens.
I just want to say too, like, trading him, I mentioned the cap would clear up a lot of cap space. Maybe he'll do a couple things at free agency, and then obviously a draft. But if you keep Aaron, we really can only add through the draft, because we're strapped for cash, and there's no one that we can really get rid of. So, and also, sorry, so that was that. I do want to add, obviously, Jalen Hurts, my baller of the week. Like I said, gave me shades of Kaepernick. I got to hand him respect, because yeah, he was doing whatever he wanted almost against us, him and Miles Sanders, of course, who Miles also in consideration, but I got to get love a little more to the quarterback when the quarterback rushes for 150 plus yards. So huge win for the Eagles. They stay at 10-1. And yeah, as we've already talked through, Packers can have some interesting decisions to make going forward for their future and even immediate future. So now we head to the Monday night game, and it was the Steelers. They give Jeff Saturday a loss at home, 24-17. A little bit of some late heroics there. Also missing Najee Harris, didn't matter. Najee Harris, left this game with a Donald injury. Benny Snell filled in admirably. And yeah, John, what were your thoughts in regards to the Steelers? I won't say upset, but getting kind of a big win here against the Colts.
I definitely think it was a big win. Interesting that they were able to get the run game going despite Najee Harris going out. Man, Najee's just he's interesting because he's a really big back. Like I don't think people realize how big he is because he's 240 pounds. He just doesn't play like it. Like there were some plays early in that game that I was like, man, Najee, you just got to lower the boom on some of these people if you're going to be that big. Otherwise, I think maybe he should slim down in the offseason. I don't know. I'm not out on Najee Harris yet, despite the fact that he hasn't been that great this season. But they still found a way to win. George Pickens is a freaking baller, man. Like that sideline catch he made, the adjustment with his body. He's just so good at stuff like that. And then he got that little 2-point conversion with him and Kenny Pickett, the chemistry on that one. That was cool to see. Just a scramble drill trying to make something happen, and they're both on the same page there. So good win for the Steelers. For the Colts, I don't know. It was interesting because it felt like, if you look at the box score, Jonathan Taylor, 20 carries, 86 yards, and a touchdown. But when you watch that first half, it didn't really feel like they got Jonathan Taylor that involved. Like it felt like, for the most part, to start the game when they allowed the Steelers to get that early lead, it felt like they were just coming out slow. They were throwing the ball a lot. Like I think there was even a point like in the second quarter that like they hadn't completed a single pass and Jonathan Taylor really hadn't got much going at all. I don't know. It seems like if you're going to, have this sort of style of play, you got to rely on Jonathan Taylor early and often. Like you can't come out early and try to throw the ball, allow yourself to get behind like this because Pittsburgh capitalized early, and then be like, okay, now we got to start running, because then it's too late. Like you got to control the game early. So other than that, I don't know. I don't have much else to say except for like Jelani Woods had a good performance, the rookie tight end, sort of a coming out game for him. But other than that, I think the Steelers, I don't know. I don't want to rag on Jeff Saturday because I do think he's actually doing a lot better than I expected him to. But simply put, the Steelers are just the more well-coached team. Jeff Saturday did not have the greatest clock management at the end there. I don't know what was going through his mind not calling the timeout after Matt Ryan got that big, run on third down or second down that was like a third and short all of a sudden. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to criticize him too much because the guy's not like a career coach. So it's not hard to see someone like that, be in that situation. He's a career player, but he was never the one calling timeouts and figuring that stuff out. So I cut him some slack. But I do think that they just kind of got out coached tonight on Monday night.
Yeah. I don't have much else to add really. Obviously didn't help. Like you mentioned early on, second play, interception. And then, luckily Pittsburgh didn't capitalize much off that. But yeah, like you said, against a better offense, especially a better teams, that could have been killer. When I saw that pick, I was like, man, this might be game over. Pittsburgh scores a touchdown here, it's game. But I think I do want to continue to give credit to the Colts defense because despite that, they still kept their team in this game, and it wasn't easy. And Pittsburgh didn't really have much success offensively either. It was a tough night. Kenny Pickett only had 20 completions, 174 yards. Like, nothing groundbreaking. Not trying to dog on him. He did good with what he had. But yeah, it's like you mentioned, it's one of those things. I wasn't necessarily thinking of it, but yeah, it was in my mind. I was like, they should probably be using timeouts here. I wasn't. I was more focusing on what was happening, not thinking broad scope. But yeah, we'll see. I guess how these two teams turn out. Like you mentioned, technically not out of the race, but especially for Pittsburgh, relatively young team. They're kind of in a rebuild phase. So it'll be, hey, the above 500 dream still not dead for Mike Tomlin, and they're 4-7. So maybe this is the momentum they need. I know I say that like every week, but I'm gonna keep saying it until they have 9 losses. And for the Colts, yeah, like we'll see what happens. But obviously some adjustments and learning needs to be has been made for Jeff Saturday in the game. So those are our week 12 reactions. Pretty loaded week, although like I said, every team played, so not shocking. Obviously we'll be back later in the week for our week 13 picks against the spread. Definitely some less games to pick. As per usual though, if you could like, comment, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. That is, we are on the road to 1,000 subs there. We also have our podcasts up on all podcast mediums, which is Shut Up and Ball, wherever you get podcasts. If you can rate, review there. And then we're all on social at Shut Up and Ball Pod on Instagram if you're not already following us. And our TikTok and Twitter are at Shut Up and Ball. Otherwise, that will do it for Don and myself for week 12 reactions and thoughts. Like I said, we'll be back for week 13 picks. And we'll see y'all later in the week. Adios.